Welcome back to another episode of Projecting Grandeur. I am your host, Ron Dichter. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we've got a pretty special show, something that personally, and maybe selfishly a little bit, I want to learn more about. And we've got somebody with us who is, an expert in the world of AI and is really doing some fairly revolutionary things. So I want to just take a moment and introduce you to Ethan Monkhouse. He is the CTO of Niviro. It's an AI growth engine which helps creators, founders, businesses really transform their followers into high-value superfans and drive real revenue. So I am really excited to get into it. Ethan, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Ron.
You bet. All right, so let's go back a little bit to the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what sparked your interest specifically in behavioral psychology and how that really led to building, AI systems for audience growth?
Yeah, I mean, it probably started off when I was about 15. I was in high school and I started to notice that a lot of businesses were quite behind when it came to the online world. And so what I ended up doing was I went to a load of different businesses around my local town and said, hey, I'll build you a website. And I didn't charge anything. And then soon enough, they kind of realized, oh, wait, we've got this website, but we don't really have anything to go up on it. And that's when I came in again and was able to actually form the content for them. And that's when I started to realize, wow, this is moving quickly in the sense where I'm creating content right now, and it started off as photos and then videos and then blogs and all these different types of content that they weren't able to stay on top of. And that was probably when the ball or the penny dropped, where I was like, wait, I'm never going to be able to be at the forefront, in the sense where it moves so quickly. We're going to need technology to keep us at the forefront. And so that snowballed, built that more into kind of like an agency and then eventually like automation. But the fascinating thing was I had come across AI and machine learning maybe, going to say 4 years before ChatGPT became, I guess, publicly released or just everywhere. And what was fascinating is some of the things that we were doing back, even when I was like 16, 17, are becoming all the hype right now. And it just goes to show that that technology existed for so long. But it's only when it gets that mass exposure that you see that mass adoption. And I think right now, especially for businesses that are looking to adapt but also stay ahead, it's worth looking, okay, where's the tech that we don't know about? Like, what is the tech that isn't at the forefront on paper right now? And I think that's really important because it's not from a hypothetical sense, it's what we actually ended up seeing that allowed us to stay ahead as this technology evolved.
Yeah, that's interesting. And good on you on kind of recognizing that early on, because I know a lot of us were like, as soon as Chat GPT hit the market, we're like, oh, AI exists. But to your point, it existed long before that came to the forefront. You've got all a really interesting background because it's not just about tech. You also have this academia side to you, which is really interesting to me. And you did some academic work for Trinity College that I know received some top honors. And I'm curious how that foundation informed your approach in commercial and creative applications like Niviro.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting and slightly weird combination I have because I'm a nerd at heart, which allowed me to, I guess, acquire these kind of technical skill sets. But what was really interesting is I went down the computer science route, started studying software engineering, and that tied in with business and the financial aspect as well. But what I found super interesting is that everyone in my year or my cohort was super technical, but had very little EQ. They were great when it came to computers, but when it came to interacting with people, it wasn't the same. And I think that's almost a given with a lot of software engineers. But it got me thinking, okay, if the world is going inherently more online, what does that mean for emotional interaction? Not emotional intelligence, but emotional interaction, and how that actually consolidates in the form of EQ or whatever we want to call it. And that's where that research stemmed from. It was actually just prior to COVID when I started on it. And it was all about looking at, okay, if people are going to be remote, the environment's changing. And if the environment's changing, there are going to be certain things that are going to be restricted. There are going to be certain things that change. but there's also going to be a lot of new variables and factors that get introduced. And I think that's what I really lent into, was that rather than seeing remote work or remote environments as a hindrance, trying to find those variables that we could tweak to actually get a higher output. And it was more so, for example, like we looked into, okay, we've got a team. What if we took out the manager? What if we made the entire team self-managed? And we did that by controlling these different environment variables. Small things as in, remember, we ended up introducing appraisals, but also criticizing people, but anonymously, but we angled it and weighted it in a way where people wouldn't overly criticize or overly appraise. So there was a bit of a balancing act there. We found output increased. We did another thing where a lot of people are familiar with the green active mark on, say, Slack, on Teams, or whether someone's active or online. What we did was, first we removed it. That didn't work. But then we introduced it again. And instead of saying active now, we changed it to active within the last 60 minutes. So instead of knowing, oh, this person's online, you just knew they were online in the last hour. That made, weirdly enough, the output increased again, because people were not hyperfixated on keeping their mouse moving for the sake of that, but rather, okay, hey, I've been around in the last hour, I've been online, but they were more reluctant to actually just work for the sake of working. So with small things like that we found that all tied together to create this environment where the team was just entirely self-managed. We found that the output of a self-managed team was higher than that of a managed team. And on top of that, the self-managed team weren't aware they didn't have a manager, which was fascinating.
Yeah, that's very interesting and kind of surprising on the results that the self-managed actually outperform. But actually, when you think about the root of it, it probably does make sense. Uh, Very interesting. Well, you've done a lot of work, not just with academia and small companies. You've worked with some really big brands, and I'm curious about. I know that you engineered kind of digital revenue systems for big brands like Lexus and UBS, like household names. Can you share maybe some defining moments in that campaign that really shaped your approach to attention economics?
Yeah. Okay, I'll need to think through and make sure I can speak about everything that I'm about to say.
We can't have
So,
everybody sign NDAs, so don't say anything you're not supposed to.
yeah. So, which ones can I think about? Talk about. Definitely within UBS, one groundbreaking moment for me, and just realizing that a lot of huge companies are unaware of this, was the amount of data being collected unknowingly. And when I say this, it was to the point where I was like, whoa, I've never seen that amount of data. For context, there was 4 terabytes of activity tracked daily that was just shoved into a data warehouse. Not being used purely just for logging perspective if anything went wrong with a piece of tech or software, something like that. And that's when I was like, whoa, we can infer so much from this data. And I can't go into the intricacies of the system we built out, but what was mind blowing was how predictive that data allowed us to be. In the sense where it wasn't just looking at data that was historical, it was looking at historical data, looking at forecast data, and then using that to predict further along. Predict both vertically, being, say, for a individual scenario. Let's say I was building out a trading algorithm. It was going to do this. The plan was to do that. It would be able to forecast and predict, okay, timelines associated with that, but then performance there. But then also it could work horizontally. So it could actually take what it knew from that prediction on a trading algorithm and apply it to, I don't know, an asset management system. And I think that was what was fascinating, where people, that was for me where I realized, wow, data is, we knew it was valuable, but it's at that point where I was like, okay, it's actionable, which is where a lot of people fall into the trap. They all know, oh, we need to collect data. We need to collect data. Data is the new currency. That's all well and good, but provided you know what to do with it. And I think for me, that's when I was like, okay, now I can really look at okay, what is that data telling me? Why is it telling me that? But then also, how can I action that data?
That I think that's a great segue into my next thing because I want to dig into Naviro a little bit and kind of understand, what you can share with the audience here. But when I read about it, you guys describe yourself as your AI growth team, which I like the tagline, by the way. But the concept, as I dug deeper, is really about like delivering cross platform audits, audience intelligence, automated strategy, things like live optimization. I'm very curious though, like what inefficiencies, what frustrations, were you solving when you built Naviro?
So for me, I've actually been on the other side of the playing field. I've built and scaled multiple agencies across from creative all the way to high performance, experienced all of it. And it was great in terms of running an agency. Margins were great. You had fantastic billables. The problem was that was reserved for the top 5% of businesses that had the cash flow, the ability, and just I guess, the forward thinking to invest that money to get those quality strategies. And so with Naviro, the idea behind that was to actually level that playing field. Because when it's in the form of software, those costs can be passed down to the consumer. And it allows your individuals who are starting a side hustle, or they've got something on the side, they're still working a full-time job, but they've got a part-time job and they're trying to split both, but they haven't got thousands to pour into marketing per month. That's where we step in. It's like we can give you that strategy and that guidance and that ability to take action without the huge retainer. So that's where it started. And then it actually evolved into frustration around the data that we were being provided with. So one of the first things that we did when we started to build Innovero is look at what data is available, what vendors are there, what third-party data can we get. So from Meta, from Snapchat, from TikTok, from YouTube, from LinkedIn, from X, from everything, from Google as well. And what we found was that data wasn't just sparse, it was wrong. And for me, someone who's very data driven, when I have wrong data, I just throw out the entire data set. Similar to, I guess, a pack of cards. So I don't know who plays with cards missing from a deck of cards, but if you're missing one card, the entire deck is kind of useless. It's the same mentality with data. So when we started to see that, we're like, oh, God, we're going to have to build our own data set. And we knew it was going to be tricky, but once we cracked it over time, like we've been gathering data for the last 2 years. And because it's public data and it's data that we have processed ourselves, we know the data is correct. And that allowed us to infer so many insights that people, like we've been on call, I think 2 weeks ago, we had a call with a client of ours, enterprise client. They have a marketing team in-house. They're like, yeah, so we got Naviro to generate one of your reports and it was better than our senior marketing team, the team of 3 at that stage. And we were like, okay, that's pretty cool. But then they were like, yeah, but you wouldn't believe what we found out here. And I was like, what do you find? He went through and he was like, so it recommended to do more pet content or pet related content. And this is for a music band, bear in mind, with no association to pets, specifically cats. And he was like, we've never seen any sort of recommendation before. And he was like, I went in, I dug a bit deeper, and then realized that every single fan out of a collection of maybe 25,000, I think just over 20,000 fans they went through, 1 in 6 of them had a profile photo of a cat. No data would ever tell them that. And what they're doing now is creating more cat related content tied into the band, and that's just skyrocketed engagement.
That is so interesting, and I'm just dying to know the music too. That that drives. But that's a different topic. We'll save that for another day. So as I was prepping for the show, I was, as I always do a little research on you. And there's a lot of content, which is awesome, and a lot of different podcasts that I've seen you in. And there was a recent episode where you mentioned super fans, and specifically that super fans drive roughly 70% of creator revenue, which that number was astonishing to me. And so I'm curious, how does Naviro identify and prioritize these high value individuals, which I'm guessing this cat example is a great example of that. Maybe you can expound upon that.
Yeah, I think it actually ties into the data not being correct. Because we were gathering our own data, it meant we could define our own metrics. And I think that's one of the critical things into identifying these super fans, because there's a lot of vanity metrics,
Mm.
metrics that, yeah, they look great, but they don't really mean anything. Impressions being one of them, frequency being another, reach being another. So what we introduced was shareability, virality, relatability, these metrics that we could actually measure ourselves. And that gave way to a new way of fan and audience categorization or segmentation. Because we could then pick up like, okay, who is active, who's just an engager, who is a fan, and then who's a super fan. And having these different segments and categorizing them into these different buckets, it allowed us not to just identify the super fans, but identify the active fans and the engagers, but the transition they need to move across to that next segment. Because it's not just about creating more super fans, it's about moving the engagers to the active fan segment and the active fan to the super fan segment, and that whole pipeline there. And we do that by almost like the roots of a tree. So we go off, we have a look at the profile, and our algorithm does not stop looking until it has stability. So it feels it knows enough about that profile to deem itself stable. And that could involve, for instance, say for example, we put my profile up on the platform, it would go off and it would find a connection to yourself. It would find the podcast. It would listen to the whole podcast. It would have a look at any tags. It would figure out, okay, who's Ron? What does Ron do? Okay, how can Ron relate to Ethan? What are the connections there? It will go off and have a look at see, okay, what type of posts go up there? Like, what is the content? And then we'll have a look at the post. Like, okay, is there a lot of like lifestyle content? Maybe he's based in, I'm going to say, maybe you traveled to Japan recently. It will tag that and they'll be like, okay, you traveled to Australia recently. Okay, cool, tag that. And then it might pick up that, oh, wait a minute, during these times, the Grand Prix, F1 Grand Prix was on. Okay, Ron must be interested in Formula One. And then it will make certain assumptions, but inferences based on data.
Mm.
And that's where the stability just goes up and up and up. Similar to how I can sum it up is, when you're, well, it's not the case anymore, but when you used to use Touch ID to set up your fingerprint and you'd
Hmm.
be tapping and tapping and tapping different angles. That's what we're doing with our algorithm until we're like, okay, we have the fingerprint. And that's what forms the identity.
That's pretty cool and a great way of explaining it, by the way, because that's a complex thing. So really well done. So I've heard you talk about attention is passive, intent is directional, which you have a lot of good sayings. I might borrow some of those, Ethan. Uh, but I'm curious, how do we shift from chasing views, which makes us feel good, to cultivating intent, which makes our pocketbook or bank feel good?
Yeah. It comes down to, the mindset shift first leads to that shift in workflow, which then you'll start to see the shift in numbers. So mindset shift first, yes. Vanity metrics, ignore them. I think the wake up call for me was when I was chatting to a friend of mine who had at the time 1.2 million followers, and we were generating more revenue from an account with 1,300 followers than 1.2 million followers. And that was super interesting just to see how those followers are monetized. And it was eventually what caused that shift to actually, okay, let's figure out who in the audience are valuable from a monetary perspective, a financial perspective, but then also how do we tap into them? How do we get them to engage? How do we activate them? And so when it comes to the workflow shift, example I give a lot of the time is an artist we were working with was they were dropped by their label. They had about 100,000 followers. They had good engagement until then, and then there was a huge drop off. And they were about to post something. They texted me and they're like, "Hey, I'm going to post this season." I was like, "Oh, just wait, let's just run it through Niviro." And they were just going to post a snippet of music they had worked on behind the scenes. And what Niviro came back with was to say, put up a story saying, "I've been working on something behind the scenes. Not too sure if you guys are going to like it. DM me and I'll send it to you." And that did three things. One, it created this sense of exclusivity. There's something there that you haven't got access to. Two, I'm not too sure if you're gonna like it. It fostered this need to express opinion. Um, everyone wants to give their opinion. And if you're giving them a bit of a plug, they're gonna want to give it. And then third, it created a sense of wanting to take action. You actually gave them a reason to engage. And within about half an hour, I got a message being like, Ethan, what the hell? I can't run through all of these. There's so many DMs coming through. And something so simple like that. So there was a load of DMs. Then we took it a step further and we took everyone who had engaged and added them to a close friend story. Because a lot of people have broadcast channels and they auto invite when you follow someone. That doesn't matter because if I follow someone, I've just begun to know them. I'm not a fan yet. So don't invite me to a broadcast channel. So if I've engaged and actively like engage with a outreach you've done, I know about you and I'm interested in what you're doing. That should be to add them to a broadcast channel. In this case, it's close friend story. The reason we did close friends is because one, people feel exclusive. They're all like, why am I on this artist's channel? Oh my God. Oh, this artist story. Like this is cool. I want to stay on this. And what it ended up doing was people started to engage more because they were like, oh my God, I need to stay on this story. I don't know why I've been put on this story, but I need to stay. I'm going to engage with every single post. And after that, the engagement just skyrocketed. And that was 2 free actions, didn't cost anything, but just a shift in workflow and a shift in mindset on what you're monitoring. And then you're actually activating those followers that are going to take action. And that close friend story is where you can announce your pre-sales. That's because that's going to resonate with the people who are actually going to come to your gigs. Similar approach for literally every single industry. And that is where this is the important thing for, I guess, people to shift from is your audience you want to monetize, but both from a financial perspective and an emotional perspective. Like I can't drive that point home more because yes, financial is great. It keeps you doing what you love. But when they're emotional, they are your entire marketing department. They're going to market the best bits of you at no cost. And I think that is so powerful. And it's such an important thing to navigate.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't realize that you had such a presence in the music community. But as I think about that audience, like you think about people who are really talented musicians and artists, and now all of a sudden they have to figure out how to run a business, right? Because they're trying to promote. You're talking about these promotions and these things that probably they weren't even thinking about when they got started into that world. And I got to think like with what you do and with AI, automation becomes a huge tool for people. And like as I think about how you use automation, like how does that free creators to grow, like in ways aligned with their strengths? And I can see people getting burned out on the business side when all they're trying to do is the creative side. But like how does automation help in that regard?
At a very high level, it helps with consistency. And I think that is a very critical thing when you are in an industry that is inherently very unstable. And what I mean by consistency is that you're going to have up and downs. And there's going to be times where you're going to prioritize some things more than the other, but most definitely you're going to prioritize the things you enjoy doing. And for a lot of artists, and regardless of what industry you're in, you're going to prioritize the thing that got you started in that industry. So if it's making music, you're going to prioritize that. You're not going to prioritize, oh, I need to make sure I push out a story sequence on TikTok. That's not going to be a high priority and you're going to avoid it. And automation fixes that because automation makes sure that that story sequence gets out on time every week, regardless. It might need a bit of input from you, but at least it will prompt you for it. An example would be that I do not like doing weekly newsletters. I cannot stand it. And it's so critical to the platform and the Navira as a whole because it lets users know what we've been working on for the week. And we ship things ridiculously quickly. Like we've got 5 or 6 new features will be coming in every week. And we need to let everyone know. And like it hits a Friday and at 2 p.m. I'm like, oh, I have to do this now. But I have an automation that automatically reaches out to engineering, figures out, okay, what's been done there, has a look at our GitHub, what happened there, has a look at our Linear, which is our project management system, what moved across the line there, has a look at product, what happened there. Is there anything useful in terms of the docs that was changed, any sort of tutorials introduced, any social activity from, say, our CEO or myself, or any of our C-suite, any changes there, and it formats the weekly email for us. It'll send me a message and be like, okay, I found this, 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 and this. Is this good to go? And I'm like, no, this needs to change. And then it will give me a revised version. And then I just click approve, and it's sent across to Custom IO, which is a CRM, drafts the emails to everyone, and I just click a final send, and that's just sent it out to absolutely everyone, perfectly customized for that week. And it took me five minutes maybe.
That's a great example, and something that I might have to ping you about later, because I am troubled by that same concept. But again, another topic for another day. So the whole show, Projecting Grandeur, it's really about stepping, confidently into potential, right? Long before the world sees it and gives you permission to do it. Where do you see creators or founders holding back, and how does clarity really empower them to step forward?
I think when it comes to creators, I think everyone's actually going to become a creator. And I think for a lot of us, we are already, we just don't realize it yet, because there's a very clear definition of what creation is online. So when it comes to having a look at, say, AI as a whole, it's a bit of a buzzword, a bit of an ick when I hear it sometimes, but people can use AI in a way that I'm just trying to have a think about how to phrase this. AI doesn't solve all your problems immediately, but it points you in the right direction. And I don't think people realize that. So, for example, my dad actually gave me a call this morning, and he was like, "Oh, Ethan, can you teach me? Like, I have these two documents. He's a chemical engineer, by the way." And he was like, "I want to find the differences between them." He was like, "Can AI do this for me?" I'm like, "I don't know, but we can find out." And hopped on a call with him, shared the screen, and he was like, "Oh, what do I write?" And I was like, "Write that you don't know. Write that you don't know how to compare this." And he was like, "Well, surely that shouldn't make sense." And because he's so used to having to explain very structured inputs to different departments, things like that, and he explained, and he was like, "Oh, wait, it seems to be understanding these." And I was like, "Yeah, it does that pretty cool." Right? And I was like, let's give it a bit more. Let's rein in the kind of the input a bit." And we eventually got it where it was telling him what it needed to do, but also what he needed to do to get it to the best output. So he had a task. He didn't know how to navigate that task, but he went into Copilot and actually asked it, like, "Hey, I'm not entirely sure how to do this." And it was like, "Okay, I'm going to need this, 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 and this." And he sent it, and it was able to guide you. And I think a lot of people don't realize that with everything that people are doing in it across every single industry, AI is a fantastic guiding tool. So you can hop in and say, like, "I'm thinking about doing this. I'm not too sure if I want to do this." And it will guide you. And I know a lot of people will probably think, "Oh, AI is always so positive about things. It's always like, oh, that's a great idea. It's a great business idea. I don't know, implementing a glove that's a mouse or something like that." It's not like that anymore. I think because AI moves so quickly, very quickly, that rep that it had becomes outdated. So for example, M dashes. I don't know if you've heard, but AI loves an M dash. It's a very easy way of spotting if something is AI written. That is still getting quite a bit of traction online with people like, "Oh my God, you can tell it's AI written." But I've used it this morning and it's completely gone. And so it's good to just be aware, like, okay, AI moves so quickly. Any of the complaints and problems that you hear are probably going to be outdated by the time you use it.
That's interesting. And I love that you use that experience to do a hands-on training with your father. That's pretty good. Didn't just give him the answer, you actually made him work for it. I like that. A little payback, as childhood times.
Yeah.
uh, well, how do you counsel someone overwhelmed by metrics, right? Because it's everywhere, and if you're looking for metrics to transform data into what you talked about earlier, which is actionable direction, like how do you work with them, and in turn create that authenticity and grow a medium that can feel performative and not overwhelming?
start from the end in the sense where what are you trying to do? Like, what is the goal? Like, dial it completely back. Like, if I look at my reason for any sort of online presence, well, the goal where I would have initially said would be like, oh, I want to bring in more leads for Naviro. That would have been the high level what a lot of people would say. They'd be like, oh, I want to bring in more leads for my business. I want to bring in more sales. I'm like, do you though? Um, and then you take it back and you ask yourself why. I think that's a really good habit to get into is, okay, give an answer and ask yourself why. So like, why do I want to bring more leads in for Nivera? Well, I want more people to use our platform. Why? Well, I want more people to actually have access to these insane strategies. But why? Oh, because it's such a unlevel playing field. Okay, but why do you care? And it's like, well, I have an interest in that area, and I think it's moving dramatically quickly. And why do you have an interest? And it's like, well, that's where I like to be very opinionated in that area. It's something I know a lot about. And where I eventually land on is, well, I want to establish myself as a KOL in that industry. And I think it's a good thing to just almost like talk in front of the mirror and be like, why? And eventually you get to, okay, that's why I'm doing it. And then I'd write that on a post-it note. And then I'd have my other posting notes. I actually cleared them. They're downstairs at the moment. But okay, what ties me to that goal? Okay, I can push out some blogs. I could do a bit of research. I could do a podcast. I could jump on a workshop. Could do a keynote. All these different things. And is it driving me towards that? Cool. Okay, how do I measure the success of a workshop? Okay, that's where I'm taking in. Okay, how many? Like a lot of people measure how many leads come through there, but I measure how many MVPs did we build with workshops. I love getting workflows built out with people and actually seeing them convert there. And so for me, that became a metric. Workshops, how many MVPs are we getting? And that's where you start to build out metrics that are based on you and what you're trying to do rather than just following the herd in terms of, oh, everyone talks about that metric. That's what I should care about. So from my perspective, it's, yeah, some people, you do need quite a high follower count. Musicians, for example, 50,000 followers is the bar. You're not really going to get any deals or even signed by a label if you have under 50,000. But in, let's say, photography, that doesn't really matter. Your quality does. And so I think it's definitely a good grounding exercise to actually take for a lot of people who are kind of trying to navigate, okay, what metrics do I focus on? Ask the why.
That's really interesting. You're making me think in unique ways here. I just I want to kind of summarize some things here as kind of a final question, because as you think about the advance of AI and behavioral systems, really helping to empower teams and creators and the like. You mentioned this earlier, but how does that information help them operate with confidence and integrity? And I know data set's important, right? All that's the purest form, but like just in a more abstract setting, like how do we make sure that we're using these tools to help us become more confident and know that everything's better, frankly?
Yeah. AI second. I think that's probably the word, or two words I'd use in the sense where I hear all the time AI first approach. Like, no, don't be AI first. You don't want to be letting AI lead you. AI needs to be the co-pilot. And I think having that mentality that AI is the second in command is best when it comes to using ChatGPT or Claude or any sort of LLM or AI interaction, in the sense where if you go into ChatGPT and say, make me a business, it's not really going to work because you're allowing AI to make up its own decision. It's trying to create something that inevitably has to be created by a human. And I think that is just the wrong approach, but you're setting out the wrong expectations. So going into any sort of tools being like, okay, I'm first in command. AI is going to help me get there. It is the co-pilot of what I'm trying to do. And then going in and prompting. I think that's super, super important. And I think it also ties into like there's different frameworks. I think for me, I use the clear framework. I think it's like clarity, logic. I'll find the link for you. But it's generally just a framework that I'll be evaluated on. So if I send it a message to ChatGPT, it's gonna always fill out the clear framework. So it'll ask me questions before it puts my prompt through. But what it is it makes sure that I'm actually getting the most out of my prompt, but it's also following a AI second approach. I think that's super critical because otherwise you just fall down all these rabbit holes, which are not going to bring you to the final goal you had in mind. AI is great at creating noise, and it's also great at changing the goalpost.
It's interesting. You're the first person I've talked to that has said AI second, and it actually makes a ton of sense to me. And it really resonates with me that it's not that AI is not a valuable tool. It's just you have to be, the person that's prompting and kind of driving, what it does. It's just a really insightful way to think about AI. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's definitely a interesting one because actually I haven't spoken about this yet, but I was reading a paper that OpenAI released. It was like pretty much encapsulate a huge research document over the last few months on how people are using AI and LLMs. And it was really interesting to see the shift they hadn't seen before, where people now no longer want ChatGPT to do all the work for them, which is a shift that we haven't actually seen. And it is something that was predicted, which is that humans want to be in control. We want to be the pilot and the person in charge there. And for a small amount of time, we did let AI take the reins. And that's when you saw all this garbage coming onto the internet and a lot of noise and a lot of, I guess, fear for what quality was and was becoming. And we're starting to see that shift in the numbers now. So it's not kind of a huge shift right now, but we are starting to see it. And I wouldn't be surprised in a 5-6 months time that we see the AI second wording all over the place. It really wouldn't surprise me because I think that's a big thing about where we are at the moment is you need to think ahead, make a prediction, and then put a bet on that prediction.
Yeah. Well, when that happens, we'll make sure to share this episode with them so that I can be like, Ethan. Well, listen, Ethan, you've been an amazing guest, and I really appreciate it. So we have a pretty wide audience out there. I'm curious. I'll add all your links in the release of the episode. But if there's one place that you want people to go to either find out more about you or Naviro or to connect with you, where do you want them to go to?
Definitely LinkedIn. I think that's just the best place. I do monitor that very actively now. And it's a place where I can route anyone to the right place. I think that's also if people are in London, feel free to grab me for a coffee. It's I'm always down to meet just interesting people, interesting stories. And people interested in AI can chat for days about it.
I'm going to take you up on that next time I'm in London. Well, listen, Ethan, thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedule. It's been a treat talking to you. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see AI evolve. And I'm going to make sure that I share this episode when I start to hear buzzwords that you taught me months or even years before they come out. So thanks again for joining us today.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You bet. And to the rest of you out there, please connect with Ethan, follow all the amazing things he's doing. And don't forget, keep projecting your grandeur and don't wait for the world to give you permission to do it. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good day.